Patrick Henry was one of the most famous leaders of the American Revolution. He was known for his powerful speeches and strong support for American independence. His most famous words, "Give me liberty or give me death," inspired many colonists to fight against British rule. Patrick Henry played a key role in shaping the early ideas of freedom and self-government in the United States. Patrick Henry was born on May 29, 1736 in Hanover County, Virginia. His father was a farmer and a surveyor, and his mother came from a religious family. Patrick was mostly educated at home by his father, who taught him reading, writing, and math. As a child, Patrick loved to read and often listened closely to adults talking about politics and religion. Patrick tried several jobs before finding his true calling. He first tried working as a storekeeper, but his store failed. Then he tried farming, but that didn't work out either. Finally, he studied law on his own and became a lawyer in 1760. He was a great speaker and quickly became known for defending common people in court. He used simple language and strong emotion that juries could understand and believe. Henry first became famous in 1763 during a case known as the Parson's Cause. The case was about whether the King of England had the right to overrule laws made in Virginia. Henry argued that the king had no right to interfere in local matters. He said that when a king acts like a tyrant, he loses the right to be obeyed. This idea shocked many people, but it showed Henry's bold thinking and his belief in the rights of the colonies. As tensions between Britain and the American colonies grew, Patrick Henry became more active in politics. In 1765, he was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, the colonial government of Virginia. That same year, Britain passed the Stamp Act, which put taxes on paper goods in the colonies. Many colonists were angry because they had no say in the decision. Patrick Henry gave a fiery speech against the Stamp Act. He warned that if this kind of tax was allowed, it would lead to even more unfair control. In his speech, he compared King George III to Julius Caesar and said that if British rule continued, the colonies would become slaves. Some members of the House were shocked and thought he was speaking against the king, but others were inspired. His bold words helped spark protests across the colonies. The Stamp Act was later repealed. Patrick Henry continued to be a leader for freedom. In 1775, he gave his most famous speech. At a meeting in Richmond, Virginia, leaders were debating whether to prepare for war with Britain. Some wanted to wait and try for peace, but Henry stood up and gave a powerful speech urging action. He ended with the famous words, "I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." The speech had a strong effect. The leaders agreed to form a militia to get ready for war. A month later, the first shots of the American Revolution were fired at Lexington and Concord. During the war, Patrick Henry served as the first governor of Virginia. He was elected in 1776 and served several terms. As governor, he helped support the American army and keep Virginia safe. He worked closely with other leaders like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Even though he never held national office, Henry stayed active in Virginia politics for many years. After the war, a new U.S. Constitution was written in 1787. Patrick Henry did not support it at first. He believed it gave too much power to the federal government and not enough to the states. He was worried it could lead to a government that acted like a king. He spoke out strongly against the Constitution at the Virginia Convention. In the end, Virginia voted to approve the Constitution, but Henry's concerns helped lead to the creation of the Bill of Rights, which protects individual freedoms. Later in life, Patrick Henry retired from politics and returned to his farm. He was offered many important jobs, including Secretary of State and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but he turned them down. In 1799, President John Adams asked him to join the government again. Henry agreed, but he died before he could take office. He passed away on June 6, 1799, at the age of 63. Patrick Henry is remembered today as a passionate defender of liberty. He believed that people should have the right to govern themselves and to speak out against unfair rule. His speeches inspired people to stand up for their rights and helped lead the way to American independence.
Close your eyes and imagine you're walking through the stunning Library of Congress. As you walk through the grand entrance, the tall columns and beautiful decorations catch your attention. Excited visitors gather around a large display, their eyes sparkling with curiosity. You get closer, wanting to see what everyone is looking at. When you arrive at a special glass case, it holds an incredibly important piece of history. It's the Declaration of Independence. In the late 1700s, life in the American colonies was getting increasingly difficult. The colonists, who were people living in what is now the United States, were feeling frustrated. They'd been under British rule for many years, and the British government was imposing taxes and laws that the colonists thought were unfair. They didn't have any say in their choices made for them, and this made them very unhappy. The famous phrase, "taxation without representation," summed up their frustrations. It meant they had to pay Britain without having any say in what the money was being used for. The situation continued to grow worse, and the desire for change became stronger. By 1776, the idea of independence was starting to become more popular. The American colonies wanted to be free from British rule and make their own decisions. They wanted to create their own nation where they could make laws for themselves. This wasn't a small dream. It was a huge, bold step that required much courage. To make this dream a reality, the leaders of the colonies decided they needed to take a big step. They had to declare their independence from Britain. This was a big deal because it meant they were going to break away from the British Empire and become their own country. To do this, they needed a document that would explain why they wanted to be free and what they believed in. This document would become known as the Declaration of Independence. The task of writing the Declaration of Independence fell to a group of 5 people who were known as the Committee of Five. These 5 men were Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston. Each of these men played an important role in crafting the document. Thomas Jefferson was a brilliant writer and thinker who chose to be the main author of the Declaration. He was just 33 years old at the time, but his writing skills and ideas made him the perfect person for the job. He wrote most of the draft of the Declaration, carefully choosing his words to express the colonies' desire for freedom and their belief in equality and rights. John Adams was another important figure. He was a strong advocate for independence and worked hard to support the cause. He was known for his persuasive speeches and arguments. He was very passionate about the idea of freedom and played a key role in pushing for the Declaration to be adopted. He also helped to review and revise the document, making sure it was as strong and clear as possible. Then there was Benjamin Franklin, who was known for his wisdom, diplomacy, and wit. Franklin helped support the Declaration by offering valuable advice and convince others that it was the right path. The others, Roger Sherman and Robert Livingston, one was a lawyer and politician who helped with the draft, and the other was a statesman who provided valuable input and support. Together, these 5 men and others worked to create a document that would represent the hopes and dreams of the American people. After they finished the first version of the Declaration, it was shared with the Continental Congress. The Continental Congress was a group of representatives from the 13 colonies. They met in Philadelphia and debated the Declaration before making any final decisions. On July 2, 1776, the Congress voted to approve the Declaration of Independence, and 2 days later, on July 4th, the Declaration was officially adopted and signed. It's most famous for its powerful words and ideas. One of the most well-known parts is the opening statement, which says, "All men are created equal, and that they have the rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." These words set a big vision for a new nation where people would have the freedom to live their lives as they choose and pursue their dreams. The Declaration also told the reasons why the colonies were choosing to break away from Britain. It listed many complaints about how the British government had treated them. By listing these problems, the Declaration showed a clear explanation for why the colonies felt they had no choice but to seek independence. The Declaration of Independence had a huge impact on the American Revolution. It provided a strong statement of the colonies' goals and helped to unite the people in their fight for freedom. It inspired many people to join the cause and support the fight against British rule. It also helped to gain support from other countries who were interested in helping them in their struggle for independence. The Declaration of Independence is still very important today. It's considered one of the most important documents in American history and is often described as a symbol of freedom and democracy. The ideas in the Declaration continue to be a source of inspiration for people all over the world who are fighting for their rights and freedoms. In modern times, the Declaration of Independence is celebrated on July 4th each year, known as Independence Day or the 4th of July. This day is a national holiday in the United States, and people celebrate with fireworks, parades, and patriotic displays. It's a time to remember and honor the brave individuals who fought for independence and think about the values the Declaration represents. Today, the Declaration of Independence is displayed at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., where millions of visitors come every year to see it. It's kept under very careful protection to ensure that it lasts for generations to come. Visitors can marvel at the faded ink and careful handwriting, realizing that these words started the journey to freedom for all Americans. The Declaration of Independence continues to be celebrated and studied for its impact on American history. As we remember the Declaration and its legacy, we honor the courage and vision for those who fought for independence. Close your eyes and imagine it's a chilly December night, with the moon shining down on a busy harbor. Instead of the usual quiet of the night, there's a buzz of excitement and whispers among a group of people dressed in funny disguises. But they're not preparing for a party with music and games, but for something far more dramatic, a protest that would become a famous event in American history, the Boston Tea Party, an important event that helped shape the future of the United States. The year was 1773, and America was not yet a free country. The American colonies were still under British rule, and many people were unhappy with how they were being treated. They'd been living under British laws and taxes for years, and they were growing frustrated with the way things were going. One of the biggest problems was a tax on tea, which made a simple cup of tea much more expensive for everyone. Back in the 18th century, tea was a very popular drink, and it was enjoyed by people in the colonies. However, the British government decided to impose a tax on the tea, which meant that every time someone bought tea, they had to pay extra money to the government. The colonists didn't like this at all. They felt it was unfair to be taxed without having a say in the matter. They called it taxation without representation. The British government made it so that the British East India Company, a large tea trading company, were the only ones who could sell tea to the American colonies. This meant that even though there was a tax on tea, the colonists had to buy their tea from this company, making it even harder for them to find affordable tea. Many colonists felt that this was another way for the British government to control them and take their money. In protest, a group of colonists decided to take a stand. They didn't just want to complain anymore, they wanted to take action. This group was known as the Sons of Liberty, and they were determined to show the British government that they would not accept these unfair taxes. One of the leaders of the Sons of Liberty was a man named Samuel Adams. Samuel Adams was a passionate speaker and a strong supporter of American independence. He worked hard to get people to join the cause and fight for their rights. The Sons of Liberty planned their protest carefully. On the night of December 16th, 1773, they put their plan into action. Disguised as Native Americans to hide their identities and avoid arrest, they went to Boston Harbor, where 3 British ships were docked. These ships were loaded with tea that was about to be sold to the colonists. The Sons of Liberty were full of excitement as they prepared for their daring plan. As the moon rose high in the sky, they silently crept towards Boston Harbor. They carried axes and crowbars to break open the chests of tea. The harbor was dark and quiet, except for the occasional creak of the ships and the gentle lapping of the waves against the docks. The chill of the night air added to the tension and thrill of their secret mission. With a sudden burst of action, the men leapt aboard the British ships and began to pry open the wooden chests. The sound of splintering wood and the clatter of tea chests hitting the deck filled the air. The colonists worked swiftly, tossing the chests overboard in the cold, dark water. Each splash and plop of tea in the harbor made a loud, satisfying noise, and soon the water began to turn a shade of brown as hundreds of pounds of tea floated away, drifting on the surface. As dawn broke, the people of Boston were greeted with an astonishing sight: tea leaves and chests bobbing in the harbor. The British soldiers and sailors were bewildered by the sight of their precious cargo scattered across the harbor. The message was clear. The colonists were fed up and ready to fight for their rights. This brave and dramatic action not only made history, but also ignited the spark of revolution that would lead to the birth of a new nation. The tea that was dumped in the harbor was worth a lot of money, about 10,000 British pounds, which is equivalent to millions of dollars today. The sight of hundreds of chests of tea floating in the water was both dramatic and symbolic. It was a powerful message to the British government that the colonists were not going to stand for unfair taxes and control. The Boston Tea Party was more than just a protest against the tea tax. It was a turning point in American history. The British government was furious about what had happened and decided to take strong action. In response, they passed a series of laws known as the Coercive Acts to punish the colonies for their actions. These laws closed the port of Boston and allowed British troops to be housed in people's homes. These only increased the anger among the Americans. The Boston Tea Party also had a lasting impact on American society. It became a symbol of resistance and courage. The event is remembered each year and is often taught in schools as an important part of American history. It reminds us that standing up for what is right and fighting for our rights is an important part of being a citizen. The American Revolution that followed the Boston Tea Party led to the creation of a new nation, the United States of America. The ideas and values that inspired the protest against the tea tax became the key part to the country's rules. The fight for freedom and self-government that began with the Boston Tea Party led to the new nation where people had their voice in their own government and the right to make their own decisions. As we look back on the Boston Tea Party, it's important to remember the bravery and determination of the people who took part in it. Their actions helped shape the course of American history and set the stage for the creation of a free and independent nation. It was a powerful example of how standing up for what you believe in and working together can lead to meaningful change. So the next time you hear about the Boston Tea Party, think about the excitement and courage of those who took part in this historic event. Remember the lessons it teaches us about standing up for our rights and working towards a better future. The Boston Tea Party isn't just a story from the past, it's a symbol of the spirit of freedom and determination that continues to inspire people today. Close your eyes and imagine you're lying in bed. Everyone else is asleep. It's been a busy day, so you're very tired. Outside your bedroom window, the night is so dark and quiet that you can hear the whisper of the wind through the trees. You're just about to drift off to sleep when you hear something in the distance. You hear the pounding of hooves and the clatter of a horse galloping down the road. It's too late for someone to be riding. You jump to your feet and look out the window. You see a man in the cloak racing down the road on horseback. He's moving very fast. He pulls to a halt, jumps off his horse, and pounds on your door. Your father in the other room answers the door. "The British are coming," the man yells. "The British are coming." Your father hurries to the next room to pull on his coat and grab his musket. This thrilling night ride, known as Paul Revere's ride, and the battles that followed in Lexington and Concord, which marked the beginning of a fight for freedom that would change the world. It was April 18th, 1775, and the American colonies were growing increasingly frustrated with British rule. The colonies had been under British control for many years, and the colonists were unhappy with the British government. The colonies were on the brink of revolution, or overthrowing the government. The British had already started sending troops to keep order, and the colonists were preparing for what they feared would be a big fight for their freedom. The American colonies had formed local militias, groups of volunteer soldiers who were ready to defend their homes and families. These militias were spread out across the colonies, and they were secretly preparing for the possibility of a battle. In April 1775, the British decided to take action to disarm the militias and seize their weapons. They planned to march to the town of Concord, Massachusetts, where the colonists had stored a large amount of gunpowder and weapons. The news of this British plan spread quickly, and the Patriots, as the colonists who were fighting for independence were called, needed to act fast. One of the most famous figures of this time was Paul Revere. Paul was a silversmith, which means he crafted things out of silver, such as eating utensils, cups, bowls, and other necessary items. Revere was also a member of the Sons of Liberty, a group that was working to resist British rule. Revere was known for his bravery and his commitment to the cause of independence. He was chosen for a special mission that night, to ride through the countryside and warn the colonists that the British were coming. The Sons of Liberty knew the British would attack, but there was a question of whether they would attack by land, by marching, or by sea, by using ships to move them. The Patriots watching the troops decided they would send a signal if the attack was by land or sea. If the British decided to attack by land, they would put one lamp high up in the window of the Old North Church. If the British decided to attack by sea, they would put two lamps in the church. When Paul Revere saw one lamp in the Old North Church, his job was to ride his horse through nearby towns to let them know to prepare to fight. Revere set out from Boston in the middle of the night, armed with a message to spread the word about the British plan. He rode through the towns of Lexington and Concord, shouting to the people and warning them to get ready. His famous ride was not just a quick dash, it was a race against time to get the message out before the British arrived. Revere wasn't the only rider that night. Another man, William Dawes, also rode out to warn the colonists. Dawes took a different route and helped to spread the alarm. There was also a third rider, Samuel Prescott, who joined the ride later and helped to carry the message even further. Together, these men played a crucial role in making sure that the Patriots had the information they needed to prepare for the coming battle. The ride of Paul Revere and his fellow riders was a huge success. Thanks to their efforts, the colonists were ready when the British troops arrived. The British soldiers, led by Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith, began their march towards Concord in the early hours of April 19th. They were confident that they would be able to quickly seize the weapons and return to Boston without much trouble. But the Patriots were prepared. The first clash happened in the town of Lexington, where a small group of American militiamen, known as Minutemen, were waiting for the British. The Minutemen were called that because they were ready to fight in a minute's notice. As the British troops approached Lexington Green, a small field in the center of town, a tense standoff took place. The British soldiers and the Minutemen faced off, and a single shot rang out. This shot, known as the shot heard round the world, marked the beginning of the American Revolution. The skirmish at Lexington was brief, but it showed the British that the colonists were willing to stand up and fight for their rights. After the fight in Lexington, the British troops continued their march to Concord. When they arrived in Concord, they found that many of the weapons and supplies they had hoped to take had already been moved to safety. Thanks to Paul Revere and the other riders, the colonists had been warned in time and had taken action to protect their weapons and ammo. In Concord, another battle took place as the British soldiers tried to search for and destroy what was left of the weapons. The fighting continued, and the patriots fought bravely to defend their homes and their cause. As the British troops began to retreat back to Boston, they were harassed and attacked by the American militias along the way. The journey back to Boston was much more difficult and dangerous than the march out had been. The battles of Lexington and Concord were important for many reasons. First, they marked the start of the American Revolution, a war that would last several years and lead to the independence of the American colonies. The battles showed that the colonists were not afraid to stand up to the British and that they were willing to fight for their freedom. Second, the battles showed the strength of the American militias. Despite being outnumbered and facing a well-trained British army, the Patriots were able to hold their ground and make a strong stand. This early success boosted the morale of the colonists and inspired many more people to join the fight for independence. Third, the events of April 19, 1775, helped to unite the colonies in their struggle against British rule. The news of the battle spread quickly, and people across the colonies began to rally behind the cause of independence. The battles of Lexington and Concord helped to solidify the determination of the Patriots and set the stage for the ongoing fight for freedom. Today, the legacy of Paul Revere's ride and the battles of Lexington and Concord is celebrated in many ways. April 19th is remembered as Patriots' Day in Massachusetts, and there are events and activities that honor the bravery of the people who fought for independence. The story of Paul Revere's ride is often taught in schools and remembered in poems and songs, including the famous poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow that describes Revere's midnight ride. If you search our podcast or YouTube, you can find a reading of this poem. The bravery and determination shown by Paul Revere, the Minutemen, and the Patriots who fought in the battles continue to inspire people today. The idea of standing up for what you believe in and fighting for your rights is a powerful lesson that remains relevant in modern times. In addition, the battles of Lexington and Concord are remembered for their role in shaping American identity and values. The fight for independence and the courage of the people involved have become symbols of freedom and resilience. The spirit of the American Revolution is reflected in the principles of democracy and liberty that are central to American society today. Paul Revere's ride and the battles of Lexington and Concord were important moments in American history. Paul Revere's courageous ride to warn the colonists and the battles that followed marked the beginning of the American Revolution. The bravery of the Patriots and their determination to fight for their freedom played a big role in shaping the future of the United States. Let's tell the king we want to be free. That's what John Adams believed. Before America became a country, it was made up of 13 colonies ruled by the King of England. Many people were afraid to speak against the king, but not John Adams. He had a big voice, strong ideas, and he wasn't afraid to use them. John Adams helped America become free. He was a lawyer, a leader, and later, the second president of the United States. But before all that, he was just a boy from a small farm in Massachusetts. John Adams was born in 1735 in Braintree, Massachusetts. His family lived on a farm. His father was a farmer and also worked as a church leader. Young John didn't always like school. At first he thought it was boring. He liked fishing, hunting, and being outside. But his father wanted him to become a minister, so he made sure John went to school. As John got older, he started to enjoy learning. He became a very good student. When he was just 15 years old, he went to Harvard College. That was a big deal at the time. After college, John became a teacher, but he didn't want to teach forever. He decided to become a lawyer. John Adams believed in fairness. That's why he wanted to be a lawyer. He wanted to help people who didn't have power or money. In 1770, something very big happened. British soldiers shot and killed 5 colonists in Boston. It was called the Boston Massacre. The people in Boston were very angry. They wanted to punish the soldiers, but John Adams did something surprising. He defended the British soldiers in court. Why? Because he believed everyone deserved a fair trial, even if they were not popular. Many people were shocked. But John Adams showed courage. In the end, most of the soldiers were found not guilty. People saw that John Adams was fair and brave. John didn't like how the King of England treated the colonies. The king made unfair laws and taxes. The colonists had no say in the government. In 1774, John went to a meeting called the First Continental Congress. Leaders from all the colonies met to talk about what to do. John was one of the loudest voices. He said, "We need to stand up to the king." In 1776, John helped write the Declaration of Independence. This was the letter that told the king the colonies wanted to be free. Another man, Thomas Jefferson, wrote most of the words. But John Adams helped him and made sure everyone agreed. On July 4th, 1776, the colonies declared independence from Britain. John Adams was very proud. After the war, the colonies became the United States of America, but now they needed a government and leaders. John Adams was sent to Europe to help make peace with Britain. He was also the first U.S. ambassador to France and the Netherlands. He worked hard to make sure other countries respected the new United States. In 1789, George Washington became the first president. John Adams became the first vice president. He didn't like the job much. He once said it was the most insignificant office. That means it didn't have much power, but he still did his best. In 1797, John Adams became the second president of the United States. It was not an easy time. France and Britain were fighting. America didn't want to join the war. John worked hard to keep the country out of it. Not everyone liked his choices. Some people thought he gave the government too much power. Even his old friend Thomas Jefferson didn't agree with him anymore. In 1800, John lost the election to Jefferson. Adams was sad, but he went home peacefully. He showed that in America, power could change hands without fighting. That was a big deal in history. John Adams lived a long life. He read books, wrote letters, and watched the country grow. He lived to be 90 years old. Here's an amazing fact. John Adams died on July 4th, 1826, exactly 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. That same day, Thomas Jefferson died too. They had been friends, then enemies, then friends again. Before John died, his last words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." But he didn't know that Jefferson had died just a few hours earlier. John Adams was never the most popular man. He spoke his mind even when people didn't like it. But he helped build a new country. He believed in law, fairness, and freedom. Thanks to him, we have the right to speak up. We have the right to a fair trial. And we have the right to choose our leaders. John Adams' ideas helped shape America, and that's a voice worth remembering. On July 3rd, 2020, to the great excitement of its fans, Disney Plus released the musical film Hamilton. After its release, it became one of the most streamed films of the year. The film was based on the 2015 Broadway musical of the same name. The Hamilton musical was created by Lin-Manuel Miranda and inspired by the biography he read by Ron Chernow. The musical was first done as a show at Vassar College in 2013, then as an off-Broadway show in 2015. On August 6, 2015, it had its Broadway premiere at the Richard Rodgers Theater in New York City. As of 2021, over 2.6 million people have watched the live performance of Hamilton. Its album has been played on Spotify more than 145 million times, and over 2.7 million people have watched the movie on Disney+. Needless to say, Hamilton has been one of the most popular musicals of all time. Whether you've seen the musical or not, today we're going to learn more about the life of Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers of the United States. Alexander was born on January 11th, 1755, on the island of Nevis, which at the time was part of the British West Indies. Actually, there's some doubt about whether his birth actually occurred in 1755 or in 1757. At 13, his father had left, and his mother had passed away from yellow fever, and Alexander and his brother found themselves as orphans. But Alexander kept going and took on his first job at an early age. He became a clerk at a local import-export firm that traded with New York and New England. James studied with a local carpenter, while merchant Thomas Stevens gave Alexander a home. Even though Alexander was only a teenager, he proved capable enough as a trader. He was left in charge of the business for 5 months in 1771, while the owner was at sea. He read everything he could, and later developed an interest in writing. As he read and learned about the larger world, he wanted to leave the island where he grew up. In October 1772, Hamilton arrived by ship in Boston and traveled from there to New York City. He lived with Hercules Mulligan, who helped Alexander sell cargo. This job helped pay for his education and living expenses. In 1773, to prepare for college, Alexander filled the gaps in his education at the Elizabethtown Academy Prep School in New Jersey. It was there that he started learning from William Livingston. Alexander entered King's College, now known as Columbia University, in New York City in the fall of 1773 as a private student. They officially admitted him as a full student the next year. His college roommate Robert Troup spoke highly of Alexander's intelligence. He also admired his ability to speak clearly and to lead others. Once the American Revolution began, and after the first battle between American troops and the British, Alexander and other King's College students joined a New York volunteer militia, the Hearts of Oak. A militia is a small army. Hamilton studied military tactics on his own and was soon recommended for promotion. During a battle, he led a successful raid for British cannons while being fired on. Once they captured the cannons, his militia became an artillery company. On January 3, 1777, Alexander took part in the Battle of Princeton. George Washington rallied the American troops and led them in a successful charge against the British forces. After making a brief stand, the British fell back, some leaving Princeton and others taking refuge in Nassau Hall. Alexander brought 3 cannons up and had them fire on the building. Then some Americans rushed to the front door and broke it down. The British quickly put a white flag outside the window. 194 British soldiers walked out of the building and laid down their weapons, ending the battle with an American victory. In 1780, Alexander married Elizabeth Schuyler. Together they had 8 children. Alexander eventually graduated from college in 1782. His education had been slowed down by the Revolution. Later that same year, he became a licensed lawyer and argued cases before the Supreme Court of the state of New York. They appointed Alexander in July 1782 to the Congress of the Confederation as a New York representative. Alexander quit Congress in 1783 when the British left New York. He practiced law there in partnership with Richard Harrison. He specialized in defending Tories and British subjects. In 1784, he founded the Bank of New York, one of the oldest still existing banks in America. He helped restore and reopen King's College as Columbia College. The school had been closed since 1776 and was damaged during the war. In 1786, at the Annapolis Convention, Alexander drafted a resolution for the Constitutional Convention. In doing so, he was one step closer to realizing his longtime desire to have a more effective, more financially independent federal government. In 1787, while serving as a New York delegate, he met in Philadelphia with other delegates to discuss how to fix the Articles of Confederation. The Articles were so weak that they could not keep the Union together. During the meeting, Hamilton argued that the country would need plenty of money if it wanted to have a strong central government that wouldn't fall apart. While Alexander didn't play a huge part in actually writing the Constitution, he's one of the many to thank for making it happen. He wrote 51 of 85 essays that became known as the Federalist Papers. It was these papers and Alexander's powerful voice supporting the Constitution that helped ensure that the Constitution was written in 1788. When George Washington was elected President of the United States in 1789, he appointed Alexander as the first Secretary of the Treasury. The nation was facing great foreign and domestic debt because of the expenses incurred during the American Revolution. Debt is when a country or individual owes someone else money. 2 years later, Alexander played a huge role in establishing the basis for the U.S. Mint. The mint is where coins are created for people to use. They created the mint in Philadelphia in 1792. The mint issued its first coins in 1795. There was a $10 gold eagle coin, a silver dollar, and fractional money ranging from 1/2 to 50 cents. Alexander stepped down from his position as Secretary of the Treasury in 1795, leaving behind a far more secure U.S. economy to back a strengthened federal government. Having a strong financial system, which included its own coins and enough money to spend, was very important to the success of the new nation. During the 1800 presidential elections, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were running for president after George Washington stepped down. Presidents and vice presidents were voted for separately, and Aaron Burr intended to be Jefferson's vice president on the Democratic-Republican ticket, and actually tied Thomas Jefferson for the presidency. Alexander didn't love either candidate, but went with Thomas Jefferson, and this led to him beating Aaron Burr as the candidate for the party. As a result, Aaron Burr would be vice president. During his first term, Thomas Jefferson often left Aaron Burr out of the discussions on party decisions. When Thomas Jefferson ran for re-election in 1804, he removed Aaron Burr from his ticket. Aaron Burr then decided to run for governor of New York, but lost. Frustrated and feeling left out, Aaron Burr became very angry when he read in a newspaper that Hamilton had called him the most unfit and dangerous man of the community. Aaron Burr was convinced Alexander had ruined yet another election for him and demanded an explanation. When Alexander refused, Aaron Burr, even angrier, challenged him to a duel. Alexander accepted, though not happy about it. Alexander met Aaron Burr at the duel, which began at dawn on July 11, 1804, in New Jersey. When both men drew their guns and shot, Alexander was severely wounded, and his bullet missed Aaron Burr. Alexander was brought back to New York City, where he died the next day on July 12, 1804. His grave is in the cemetery of Trinity Church in downtown Manhattan, New York City. His wife, Elizabeth, went on to survive him by 50 years, and spent much of her time researching his life and writing about his legacy to share with others. She also founded an orphanage in memory of Alexander, who was an orphan himself. Alexander's life didn't start off easy at all. As an orphan in the West Indies, he often had to fend for himself. But instead of giving up, he found work and learned a new trade and did what he could to stay alive. He also found that by reading, he could become smarter and figure out ways to solve his problems. Like Alexander, sometimes life throws challenges at us, and we can learn from his example by, instead of giving up and shutting down, by stepping back and looking at our problem, learning something new, and then taking action to make our lives better. Alexander was also always looking for ways he could improve the world around him. During the Revolution, he saw that America could become something better than it was. He fought in the war, and then using everything he had read, began to research ways to make the new country stronger. By reading, we can better understand the world around us. Alexander wanted more than anything a better future for his children and the people of the new nation. Think about your community and what you might do to make it a better place. Finally, Alexander will be remembered for the ideas he wrote in the Federalist Papers, which people all over the world have read in designing their own governments. If you get a chance, read some of the ideas he shared there. Thanks for listening to this episode about Alexander Hamilton, and be sure to tune in next Monday for an episode about the creator of the musical, Lin-Manuel Miranda. Imagine marching through the forest in the fall, the leaves crunching under your feet. The air is cool, and smoke from campfires rises through the trees. You are part of an army fighting for your country's freedom. Ahead, a great battle is about to begin, one that will change the course of the American Revolution. This is the Battle of Saratoga, one of the most important victories for the American colonists during their fight for independence. The year was 1777. The American colonies were at war with Great Britain. The colonists, also known as patriots, wanted to be free and rule themselves. But the British king didn't want to lose control of the colonies. The war had started in 1775, and now both sides were fighting hard. The British had a new plan. They wanted to take control of New York and split the colonies in half. If they could do that, they thought it would be easier to beat the patriots. A British general named John Burgoyne came up with a plan to march his army from Canada down through New York to meet other British forces coming from different directions. Together they would surround and crush the American army. General Burgoyne had over 7,000 British and German soldiers, and they began their march through the thick forests of northern New York. But the journey was harder than they thought. The American army, led by General Horatio Gates, knew the land well. They slowed the British down by cutting down trees and blocking paths. Burgoyne's army also ran low on supplies and food. They were getting tired and hungry. As the British army struggled forward, the Americans prepared to stop them near a place called Saratoga. There in September and October of 1777, two big battles took place. The First Battle of Saratoga happened on September 19th. The British attacked, and the fighting was tough. The American soldiers, hiding behind trees and walls, fired at the British as they tried to move forward. One important American officer was Benedict Arnold, who helped lead attacks and encourage the soldiers. The British won that battle, but just barely, and they lost many men. Over the next few weeks, the Americans got stronger. More and more soldiers joined their side. The British, still stuck in the forest and far from help, began to worry. Their supplies were almost gone, and their soldiers were tired. Then on October 7th, the second battle began. This time, the Americans were ready. They attacked the British and pushed them back. Benedict Arnold, even though he had been told not to fight, rushed into battle and helped lead the charge. He was brave and fierce, even getting wounded in the leg. The Americans won the battle, and the British were forced to retreat. Just 10 days later, on October 17th, 1777, General Burgoyne had no choice. His army was trapped. With no food, no backup, and no way to escape, he surrendered to the American forces. Over 5,000 British soldiers gave up that day. It was a huge victory for the Patriots. The Battle of Saratoga was more than just a win on the battlefield. It changed the course of the entire war. People in the American colonies were filled with hope and pride. For the first time, it seemed like they really could win their independence from Britain. But the victory did something even bigger. It convinced France to join the war on the side of the Americans. France had been watching the war and wanted to help, but they didn't want to support a losing side. After Saratoga, they saw that the Americans had a real chance to win. France sent ships, soldiers, and money. Their help made a big difference later in the war. So many important people played a role in the Battle of Saratoga. General Horatio Gates led the American forces, and although he got much of the credit, Benedict Arnold was one of the true heroes of the battle. Later, Arnold sadly became a traitor to the American cause, but at Saratoga, he fought bravely. Another key leader was Daniel Morgan, who led a group of skilled riflemen from Virginia. They were excellent sharpshooters and helped defeat the British at just the right time. Today, the Saratoga National Historical Park stands where the battles happened. People visit to learn about the soldiers who fought, the decisions that were made, and how this one victory helped shape American history. The Battle of Saratoga teaches us that courage, teamwork, and determination can make a big difference. Even when things seemed difficult, the American soldiers didn't give up. They used what they had, worked together, and believed in their cause. It also reminds us that sometimes one important moment can change everything. Saratoga was that moment in the American Revolution. It gave hope to the colonies, brought new allies, and helped turn the dream of freedom into a real possibility. Close your eyes and imagine you're in a big meeting room. People are gathered together. Some are talking with excitement. They have many different ideas. They are some of the smartest people you know. They've all gathered together to solve a major problem. It's not just any meeting, it's one of the most important gatherings in American history. This special meeting was called the Constitutional Convention, and it took place in 1787 in Philadelphia. What these people did at the convention changed the course of history and created the government of the United States. Back in the late 1700s, the United States was a young country trying to figure out how to run itself. After winning independence from Britain, the colonies had come together to form a new nation. But there was a big problem. The system of government they had wasn't working very well. The country was run by a document called the Articles of Confederation, but this plan of government had many flaws. It gave too much power to individual states and not enough to the central government. As a result, the country faced many challenges, including money problems, disagreements between states, and difficulties in dealing with other countries. To fix these problems, leaders from the states decided they needed a new plan. They called for a special meeting, known as the Constitutional Convention, to come up with a better way to govern the country. The convention took place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it started on May 25, 1787. The city of Philadelphia was a bustling place, full of people eager to see what the leaders would come up with. The meeting was held in a building called Independence Hall, the same place where the Declaration of Independence had been signed. The room was hot and stuffy, and the representatives spent long hours discussing and debating ideas. They knew that their work would have a big impact on the future of the country and the world, and they wanted to make sure they got it right. One of the most important figures at the convention was George Washington. Washington was not only the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army during the American Revolution, but also a respected leader who was chosen to lead the convention. His role was to guide the discussions and keep things organized. Washington's presence gave the convention a sense of importance and helped to ensure that the leaders took their work seriously. Leaders from the different states were called delegates. Another key figure was James Madison, who is often called the father of the Constitution. Madison was a brilliant thinker and a strong advocate for a new system of government. He came to the convention with a clear plan in mind, and he worked tirelessly to promote his ideas. Madison's notes from the convention provide valuable insights into what was discussed and how decisions were made. His contributions were crucial in shaping the final document. Benjamin Franklin was another important figure at the convention. Franklin was an older leader known for his wisdom and experience. He had a calming influence on the discussions and helped to mediate disagreements between delegates. Franklin's ability to bring people together and find common ground was important in reaching an agreement on the new plan of government. Most of the leaders had different ideas about how the new government should be run. This is one reason why the convention was important. It's important that people with different ideas can come together, argue their ideas, and then agree on what is best for the people who voted for them. Have you ever had a disagreement with your siblings? Sometimes it's easier to want to fight physically over what to do. Instead, if you've talked through the options together and come to an agreement, that's better than fighting. This is a democracy where people can come together and decide what is best by argument and voting rather than war. At the Constitutional Convention, one major debate was about how states should be represented in the new government. Some delegates, like those from larger states, wanted it to be based on the number of people in each state. Others from smaller states wanted equal representation for each state, regardless of size. For example, each state would have 2 representatives. To resolve this issue, the delegates came up with a compromise known as the Great Compromise. This plan created a 2-house legislature, or Congress, with a Senate and a House of Representatives. In the Senate, each state would have an equal number of representatives, while in the House of Representatives, the number of representatives would be based on the population of each state. This compromise helped to balance the interests of both large and small states. After several months of intense debate and discussion, the delegates finally finished their work. On September 17, 1787, they signed the new document, which was called the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution established a new system of government with three branches: the legislative branch, Congress; the executive branch, the President; and the judicial branch, the courts. This system was made so that no one branch of government would have too much power and that each branch could check and balance the others. This kept the government fair and equal and didn't give too much power to a single person or group of people. The Constitution also included a list of rights and freedoms. This list was known as the Bill of Rights, and it guaranteed basic freedoms such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to a fair trial. The Bill of Rights was added to the Constitution shortly after it was made, and it remains an important part of American law. The Constitution was also designed so it could be changed. It needed to be flexible. Its creators knew that times would change and ideas would change, and it would need to change with the growing nation. For example, the first version of the Constitution allowed slavery. This later changed with the 13th Amendments. Amendments were changes made to the Constitution. The 15th Amendment gave African American men the right to vote. Then in 1920, the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote too. The work of the Constitutional Convention had a huge impact on the future of the United States. The new Constitution provided a plan for the government and helped to create a better nation. It has had a lasting impact on American society. It is the oldest written national constitution still in use today, and it has served as a model for other countries around the world. The words in the Constitution continue to guide the United States and influence how the country is governed. The Constitutional Convention also introduced the idea of compromise as an important part of the political process. The delegates had to find ways to agree on issues despite their differences. Their ability to reach compromises helped to create a successful document. This lesson in compromise remains relevant in today's politics and government. The Constitution is also celebrated in various ways. September 17th, the day the Constitution was signed, is known as Constitution Day. It is a time to remember the importance of the Constitution and the contributions of the delegates who worked to create it. Schools and communities often hold events and activities to honor this important day and educate people about the Constitution. In conclusion, the Constitutional Convention was a crucial moment in American history. The delegates who gathered in Philadelphia in 1787 worked hard to create a new plan for governing the country, and their efforts resulted in the United States Constitution. The Constitution established a strong and effective government, protected individual rights, and set the stage for the future growth of the nation. The work of the Constitutional Convention continues to influence American society today. The principles and ideas outlined in the Constitution remain central to the country's identity and values. As we remember the Constitutional Convention and the creation of the Constitution, we honor the vision and dedication of the delegates and celebrate the enduring impact of their work.